Which one's going to win out of these two? Let's find out. First things first, excuse my noisy coat, alright? It's freezing cold in here. I don't want to turn the heater on because I'd just rather talk to you guys for a minute. It's noisy as you like. In front of me is Sony's XS163ES 3-way set and DYNAUDIO's ESOTEC 342. Yeah, 342, okay? So many numbers to remember. As you know, we're big DYNAUDIO fans through their hi-fi stuff, their car audio stuff, everything about them. Their signature sound, you can tell whether you're in a car, whether you're sat in front of one of their high-end speakers, they have this beautiful fluid mid-range. The Sony ES 3-way is brand new. I don't know anything about it really, I've never heard it, I couldn't tell you if it's any good. One sits at £1,000, the other one sits at 400 quid. Alright, so you would think, well, this one's going to be easy 2.5 times better. Well, you know, a bad speaker can sound good with enough work. Alright, so what we're going to do, because of the T4 van and its simple build that somehow I tricked myself into thinking that it was going to get, we have a bass in a relatively cheap van there that we can cut about, chop around, make a bit of a test bed. So on my mind was always to run the 342 because there is an option in that van to run the mid-range, the dome mid-range from this on axis and quite close to the mid-bass. And the key in using that dome is to have the mid-bass on axis. You can't realistically run that dome and have a real big full, you know, decent stage up top above the dash if you have these mid basses buried in the door and you have the dome on axis with you. It limits you. I think I've had them at around 700, and then you can start to hear that, you know, they're just not having loads of fun. So that's a huge gap to fill up from a mid bass that's mounted in a door, and you can just really easily locate that and just pull your stage down. Like, because of that, we can use these because I can build and will build door builds in that van, and I'll have them relatively on axis, not completely on axis but relatively on axis. And both sets of 3-ways will be subject to exactly the same fabrication, exactly the same build. In fact, the way that it's going to be built is there's an overall, what we call a generic baffle, right, which has a rebate, it's still got to look nice, and then we will have a spacer for the DYNAUDIO mid bass, and we will have another rebated ring for the Sony mid bass, because the Sony mid bass with a rebate, with trim allowance, fits inside that of the footprint of the DYNAUDIO. They're both 6.5-inch drivers. It's not like one's an 8 and one's a 6. It's just the DYNAUDIO driver is much larger, but its piston area is effectively the same. So piston area that isn't the same is the 2.5-inch mid-range driver from the Sony ES line. Okay, now with a 4-inch dome and a 2.5-inch classic sort of cone driver, I think I can tell what they're going to sound like, the sound difference. I know what this one sounds like. I think I can predict what that one's going to sound like. But what we can't guess, and we could probably science to a certain degree, is the IB nature that they'll be installed in, and this being a more pistonic driver in the door space. We might see a much lower crossover point from the 2.5-inch driver, which will have a massive effect on the overall stage. So I think that might go in the Sony's favour. The tweeters, funnily enough, I think are 66mm, both of them, in terms of their mount. All right, well, I think one's 65, I think the Dyn's slightly smaller, and the Sony's 66 because it has this funny little lip on the back. But that means that we can have the same ring to mount both the tweeters. We can just adapt the DYNAUDIO mid-range ring, tweeter ring, sorry. So that will give us the same amp, the same head unit, the same van, the same door build, the same mid-range build, tweeter build, the same cabling, the same tune to a degree, because we can literally just change the speakers. that wouldn't be fair, because there's two different sets of tolerances here that we need to tune for. So there would be one tune for one tune for the other, both set up by the same person with the same level of expertise, so they will have the equivalent sort of hat in the ring, so to speak. I'm well looking forward to this. Most of the cars that I build for myself, given time, I have made in a modular fashion. My Mark V GTI was modular, my M5, that was modular as well, with hybrid audio, swapped out with like audio synthesis and stuff like that. So I love a modular build. I love to be able to change, usually my mid-bass, to be fair, because I'm usually quite happy with my top end. I can dial that in, but mid-bass, different QTS, different sort of enclosure sizes, things like that, you really can muck around with them and get an outstanding difference in your actual stage. They do an awful lot, considering they're probably the narrowest band, other than the woofer, I suppose, that they play. So sub-wise, not thought about it yet. Might end up with a comparison between the Esotar 1200 and the Sony 12, which I don't fancy the Sony's chances at all. The Esotar 1200 is the best subwoofer I've ever heard. It's in terms of SQ, it's just absolutely outstanding. And then you can just have loads of them if you want, like we did in the Caddy, and they get really loud. And you can run them IB, you can run them sealed, you can run them ported. Oh god. Anyway, there is scope in that van for a central 12-inch sub box in front of the dash, in front of the gear stick. That might come in time, but for now we'll probably end up with a fly-leaded sub box somewhere in the back. Do you want to see these drivers? Should we get them out? Let's have a quick look at them, and we can, you know, map out. You can get to see the differences, all right? I've already had them all out. Right, the dyne boxes. These have been the same for 1,000 years. They're all exactly the same. The MD102 is a revision. It's the newer one of the bunch, but it's still about 10 years old. That's the MD102 tweeter. You can take this out. You've got to be careful, because this bolt holds the motor structure together. If you're too rough with it, you'll knock them out of line and it won't work. This thing, hugely attractive. Most people absolutely love it and love the idea of having a dome mid-range. Now, I think in a hi-fi environment, 2-channel, so they're in front of you, they are effectively on the same plane as the mid-bass driver and the tweeter, albeit maybe slightly spaced for different time alignment measurements or reasons. In a car, somewhat compromised in that, like I said, you pretty much want your mid-bass on axis so that you can marry this up from a crossover perspective. You try and get a mid-bass to play 650, 700 hertz and point it at your leg, and it's just gonna drag the stage down. There is tuning, of course, that you can do to try and remedy it, but naturally, the speaker being down there and playing that high frequency, it's not going to enjoy it. So yeah, if you can get your mid-bass on axis, then cracking. Loud as you like as well. People like them for a bit of output. Heavy, that weighs a ton. See if we can get this mid-bass out without completely destroying the box. Oh, in case you're interested, 3-way passives. We don't use them, but if we did, we'd have 6 spare channels, so as we could run everyone else's car as well. DYNAUDIO speakers all come with grills out of the box as well, which is becoming a rare thing. This is the, now legendary to be fair, the MW line of mid-bass from DYNAUDIO. Those of you that know DYNAUDIO will instantly recognise the back of the basket. And if you're thinking, oh, you know, it looks like a Morel driver, that's because the owners or developers of Morel and DYNAUDIO were one and the same. Some very similar thinking with those drivers. It's an MSP cone as well. Deal with tons of power, loads of output, huge voice core. It's got a fatty voice core. It's about 4 inches on there for a mid bass, which is ridiculous. Right, I need some surface area. Give me some surface area. Now, this is kind of Sony's box leaves a little bit to be desired, I must admit. It could be twice as thick for not much more cost, and short of it turning up here in a huge shipping package with multiple other things and being safe, it is package safe inside. This is just general moving it around the workshop. It's ripped and broken, and I don't think it'll be indicative of the quality of the speakers. Okay, so a lot of gubbins going on in here. You've got to think this is a slightly different market, okay? So this is your guy, or aimed at your guy, who's sort of starting out or has already had something, wants something a little bit nicer but doesn't want to go what he may consider crazy, which is our sort of, almost our sort of start point here typically. And everything comes out of this bloody box as one thing. So that, it's a bit floppy, Sony. Okay, 1 times mid bass. Now, where they do well is they put this little lush piece of cloth between the grill and the speaker. I wish everyone did that, because there will be shipping marks on there, I can guarantee you, just from general couriers just lobbing stuff around because they're unhappy with what they're doing. That's the ES driver. Loads of technology in this. When I very first unboxed these ages and ages ago, I was complaining at their plastic basket. I've spoken to Sony since, and there is tech in here to keep this as light as possible but as rigid as possible, and they assure me it's as rigid as a sort of cast alley or steel basket. Ferrite magnet in there. This looks like some sort of cooling fin. I don't think it is. I don't know why you'd want to cool the outside of the magnet there, but it may be inductive. It might actually pull air through. I don't know. Looks decorative to me, but there's some cool tech in there. You can see the back of the cone if you can get through to there. Not an ugly speaker. It's got cuts on this roll edge, which they say is for linearization of the cone on the high load. And the grill, not a huge fan of the grill, but we do have grills in the box, which is a big deal. That is a steel grill. The old lip test. The thing that impressed me the most about these when I unboxed them way back was the tweeter. The actual mounting depth of the tweeter is crazy. I'm looking forward to hearing what this sounds like, because I've heard some really special, very small tweeters. Tweeters don't have to be bananas in size. They can be, and there are good reason for it sometimes. Lower resonant frequency, simpler crossover points, things like that, but that looks like a dream to fit pretty much anywhere, you know. Other than the fact that it's quite wide. Like I say, the Dyn tweeter is quite big, but the Sony tweeter I think is 1mm larger, and it's because of this silly little lip on the back. Get rid of that. Dyn tweeter there, Sony tweeter here. Now, the one that brings up the most topic of discussion, and I agree, is the mid-range. It's a dinky little thing, but it has these Gary Lineker-esque ears on the side. And I just can't get behind it. Sony, make it a 4-pin for standard, alright? I get that there's a lot of OEMs out there that use a 2-bolt, 2-inch mid-range that you could just drop this straight in. But for anyone who actually cares about sound, they're going to want to be able to get this in a smaller profile. So when I created the spacer for this, I created it this size. I didn't create it this size. So we know what's going to happen to these. Alright? And then we'll have to find a way of fixing them down. Well, then they might get bonded to a baffle, and then the baffle will have a 4-pin, like, you know, screw fit. Like I say, as of right now, I don't really know all of the numbers. I don't know the resonant frequency for the mid-range. Should we have a look? Give me some specs. Oh, hang on. Mid-range says it's 3.5 inches. Should we have a look? I mean, where are we measuring that? Surely we would measure cone. Surely we would measure cone sort of diameter, rather than. Can't measure it from. If you measure it from the edges of the steel, it's 3.5. You measure it from the roll edge, it's 2.5. I think they've given it to us as a system total, so 40 to 40k. I'd be interested to see what the mid basses sound like at 40. I'll see if I can find out anything more about the 2-inch, because that's what I'm interested in. And to be fair, I might have to look at the crossover specs, because we want to know that. From a tuning point of view, we pretty much want to know where we're safe to go from, because I would, you know, if it said 3.5 and I was blind and I believed that, I would probably be looking at about 200 hertz, 250 hertz, which is, you know, 200 might be in the danger zone, you know. So, you know, if it's 500, we don't want to be halving that, you know, or maybe we do. Yeah, so that's that anyway. Passives are pretty, like you can see there is air core in there, it's all lush and copper and large, everything's quite nice, there's a lot of decent componentry gone into there. Consider again, 399 quid. Let me show you a DYNAUDIO one. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the DYNAUDIO one isn't quality, because DYNAUDIO's crossovers are probably as good as it gets in terms of car audio, I mean. But they're the two equivalent crossovers. Lovely stuff. We won't be using either of them. I'm just kidding. Remember when we used to make features of passive crossovers, like back in the day, they'd be a part of your door build. You'd have your mid bass, and then halfway down your mid bass build you'd have your passive in there, which would look nice, like a dreamy one, like a Focal Utopia passive crossover, or an early Audison, would it be VR, or Audison Thesis passive crossover or such. Mental. And the JL Audio, like teardrop shaped passive crossovers in the door build. Anyway, that's enough. That's enough of that. Let's lay them out so you can see them. Now, I put this on our Instagram. It was pretty much a picture. It was on this same flight case. I put it on our Instagram, and a lot of people commented. There's a lot of people saying, you know, there was one guy who stated the obvious and said that the speaker will sound as good as the tuning. Cheers, mate. There was a lot of people that were interested, not necessarily from the point of view as, oh, I don't know which one's going to sound best, but they were sort of, most people are on Dyn's side, and I have to be honest, so am I. You know, how couldn't I be? I'm a big Dyn fanboy. I think they make some of the best car audio products that have ever been made, and home and hi-fi products, which we sell also. You know, I really do get behind DYNAUDIO, but then I am also a massive fan of Sony. I like their simplicity, I like their way of thinking, I like their way of doing business. They're a good product. Do they fit with us? We'll only know after we compare the two, because we do constantly sell and install speakers at this price level. For us to shift over to a speaker that is you know, less than half the cost, it has to be better. You know, then the margin in the product doesn't matter. You know, if it is a better sounding product, it'll get used. What I'm expecting, my early predictions, is it'll be a one-sided beat down from DYNAUDIO, but the Sony will leave us in relative perspective and endearing performance. We'll probably be happier with the Sony because it cost 400 quid and it didn't cost 1,000 quid, and it will put up a good fight. That's what I think. You know, first off, you have to watch the second video, which will probably be us building something and not listening to anything. And then the third one will probably be the one where we've listened to something, or at least the DYNAUDIO system will be in, or the Sony system will be in. Which do we fit first? Because we've got the power with that, with those generic door builds and mid-range builds, to fit whichever one we want. Within, I'm not, you know, no exaggeration, we could swap a full three-way in under 10 minutes. Because we've just swapped them out, you know, for our sort of generic spacers that go inside the generic baffle, or custom, you know, per speaker sort of spacers that go into the generic baffles we created. I'm really looking forward to this one. Anyway, I'm Carl, this is Studio Incar, and this is me having a little bit of fun, so expect it to be a little bit more lighthearted. All right? You take it easy, guys, and like I say, let me know in the comments what you think to a comparison between the two.